Ever since first hearing Zero on this channel from Ace Combat Zero, I have become a convert to the magical mystery that is Ace Combat's music. In a lot of ways, I think that it connects most closely in terms of classical music to the original art style of oratorio, which was religious works written for the purpose of highlighting the Bible and different verses from the gospel. It's amazing how Ace Combat can take musical ideas like the Dies Irae, now this is 2011, but put them in a modern soundscape. This piece from Ace Combat Assault Horizon release is phenomenal. Now that is exceptional. We start with tension and strings. There's something so visceral and so primal about hearing the human voice do that. That's not something that we hear every day. There is a rawness, there's a brutality, there is a feeling of nakedness when we hear voices kind of siren. That's what we call it in vocal terms. Something very vicious about hearing and almost scary. Hearing a choir of seemingly 200 people going, that really hits us in an emotional spot. We understand that this particular piece is very clearly some kind of epic struggle, some kind of epic battle, where the stakes are absurdly high. The fact that we use the Dies Irae in this piece later on is also really interesting to me, because the Dies Irae is a Latin sequence attributed to either Thomas or Celano of the Franciscans, or to Latino Malabranca Orsini, lector at the Dominican Stadium at Santa Sabina, the forerunner of the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas in Rome. The Dies Irae speaks on the day of wrath. The poem describes the last judgment, the trumpet summoning souls before the throne of God, where the saved will be delivered and the unsaved cast into eternal flames. Of course, it is best known for its use in the Roman Rite Requiem, Mass for the Dead, or Funeral Mass, and of course, if you're a classical music fan, you'll know this from Verdi's Requiem, the incredible Dies Irae that you've probably heard in a million different movies and just didn't know. I suggest you look it up. Back to Ace Combat Assault Horizon release. This opening is visceral. It hits you, and then you're like awake. And you're flying through the air at Mach 3, and you're maneuvering around and avoiding getting hit by missiles. There's an intensity. There's an unbridled sense of tension, even in the first 12 seconds, which is crazy. Listen to that. Strife! Ravage, perish! Single words sung in upper ranges of the human voice are inherently, as a natural phenomenon, going to cause an inherent sense of tension. This is going to be the key word of this entire video. Tension. Perish! That's very intense. Pointed singing on an upper register, so it's going to ravage, boom, perish, psh, it hits you. It's like a punch, a vocal punch in the face. Notice how the vocalism is going higher and higher. Ruin! Boom! Big brass bottom half there sustaining it. So now we start this ramp up of tempo and speed. Now we have a little bit of drumming on an offbeat. Now we have a feeling of propulsion as we turn up the engine on our jet and we launch forward. We feel that we are on the offensive in this moment because of the way that Also note that flee is on the highest. Flee! That's very high. And so it's interesting. You don't hear this very often in music, which is such a shame. I find when we pull back here and we sort of settle from that tension and we then have this pulled back, almost technological sound quality, there's a couple options here. Some could be related to context and some could be related to out of context. Certainly in context, you could say that we're fighting something mechanical, something technologically advanced, a series of drones or something, right? Why else would we have that being said, now not knowing the context of this piece, but knowing the music after having listened to it a couple times before filming this video, one could argue that this music is actually the sound of the advanced technology in our airplane, the sound of the missile preparing to fire, the way the computer system works. There's a whole bunch of different ideas that can come from just the soundscape, but it's intentional because it was written in. And usually when we have music written in, there's almost always a purpose for it. There is a reason why a composer includes things. I do think that there's probably some sort of technical enhancement that's occurring. But again, I'm also on this idea of this being a modernized classical musical trope, that of the oratorio, telling the story of biblical beings in a sung fashion. But you instantly hear how we pull back and we shift from that, and we switch, and then we have, you hear how plaintive the way that I believe they're cellos or viola, but the way it goes, very singable because the cello is the closest instrument to the human voice, and so there's automatically this sing-songy, you hear how even that cascading down, it gives it an essential human sadness to it. So even though we're in the heat of combat, there actually is some sort of burden that exists here emotionally that our pilot or our pilot's companions are feeling, or perhaps the one-on-one battle or something. And so there's automatically this sort of odd animosity between you and the enemy fighter. I mean, there's a million different ways, but that sadness in there, that descending line is absolutely sad. It sounds sad, right? Big swell. Not to stop us in the middle of a tension moment, but do you feel how that swelling boom, 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 gets louder and then it gets softer? That's what we call a sforzando. A sforzando is something where we go boom, we grow and we grow and we grow, and then we revert right back to the original volume or dynamic size. And so when we listen to this piece, there's an inherent through line of that tension that doesn't really escape us ever. There's an inherent feeling of, uh-oh, this could go badly. So this is really interesting. So again, we have this big swell. We go strife, and then in the strings, I want you to pay attention to this. It's interesting because we actually get almost like a secondary melody underneath. Do you hear, this is so like almost pedantic, but do you hear how a little shift in note, you hear how just a little bit of an accent note, an upper neighbor, somehow is able to cause an inherent feeling of driving motivation and driving propulsion forward? It's a really interesting and satisfying thing to listen to that is very under the surface, but worth pointing out. Do you notice here now too, now we've got strife, ravage, perish, ruin, rush, fear, devious, flee, as we continue on through the song, as we continue to build and build and build and build, that tension continues throughout this piece. We have it like all the way through, but now it's like rush, ravage, because we're peaking here. This is the climax of the piece. Now this is absolutely astounding. Now we pull all the way back and we have this big quiet shift. Typically, if you listen to the Verdi Requiem, boom, boom, instead this is the opposite. We start and it's almost like a warning message, but well, which it is anyway, but it's a warning message of, hey, wait. Let me tell you something. This is a bad situation you're in. You hear that? It's almost like a quiet, hushed whisper. That's another interesting musical gesture. Boom, da-dum, boom, ba-dum, da-da-da. That's a very interesting gesture. But do you hear how that's hope? Da-dum, da-da-da, ya-da-da, ya-da-da-ya-da-ya-da. That's hope. That's possibility for change. That's possibility for goodness. That's possibility for moving away from strife, ruin. Now we're in something completely different. Now we have legato. We have smooth, connected lines. Yada, 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 yada. It's really beautiful. Big tempo pickup. Ta-da! I mean, what killer piece. And why do I keep saying that this feels like the modernization of a classical musical trope, a musical idea like the oratorio? Well, we're using Latin. We're telling a story through the telling of the Dies Irae, right? That's like a paramount and probably the most important section. Like, anytime we use Latin like that, that is where I'm going to get the idea that it's some sort of oratorio, a modern oratorio, or the modernization of a classical idea of that kind of music, because that kind of stuff is not heard almost never in video games by any stretch of the imagination. But also the way it's written, it feels very reverent. Typically, oratorio is extremely reverent, usually towards God or, you know, this people that we read about in the Bible. And again, Ace Combat's always about making these characters feel biblical in their own ways. Their stories are biblical in nature. It's not just a plane or a fighter pilot, it's gods themselves. So anyway, there's a lot more Ace Combat on the channel. I really love this sort of stuff. It's so great. I'm so glad that I've converted to the Ace Combat fandom. Feel free to like and subscribe. If you want to support me on Patreon, I'd absolutely love that. I appreciate that. It keeps the channel going. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.